Whoa, extra percent for my shooter, extra percent for my shooter, extra percent for my shooter, extra percent for my shooter.
Yo, say hi YouTube, chat. Say hi YouTube. Say hi YouTube. Say hi YouTube. All right, so Hero with 1,000 Faces. We are now in the second half of the book. I think there's 3 parts, but we are officially in part 2. Page 237. We got the first chapter in part 2. Emanations from psychology to metaphysics. Okay. Part 2 is called the cosmogonic cycle. What we're going to do is we're going to look up. We're going to definitely hit the Googles on this. We definitely hit the Googles on this. Obviously, something relating to the stars and stuff, but okay. The branch of science that deals with the origin of the universe. Okay, origin of the universe. Okay. That's what we're... I guess you could say like the universal cycle or something like that, but we'll get more context as we read it. All right? So, here we go. Raise hand. Really good. From psychology to metaphysics. It is not difficult for the modern intellectual to concede that the symbolism of mythology has a psychological significance. Particularly after the work of the psychoanalysts, there can be little doubt either that the myths are of the nature of dream or that dreams are symptomatic of the dynamics of the psyche. Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, Wilhelm Skedel, Otto Rank, Carl Abraham, Giza Roheim, and many others have within the past few decades developed a vastly documented modern lore of dream and myth interpretation. And though the doctors differ among themselves, they are united into one great modern movement by a considerable body of common principles. With their discovery that the patterns and logic of fairy tale and myth correspond to those of dream, the long discredited chimeras of archaic man have returned dramatically to the foreground of modern consciousness. Okay. So we're talking about the relationship of myth to the psyche. Myth, which would also be considered symbolism, right? According to this view, it appears that through the wonder tales which pretend to describe the lives of the legendary heroes, the powers of the divinities of nature, the spirits of the dead, and the totem ancestors of the group, symbolic expression is given to the unconscious desires, fears, and tensions that underlie the conscious patterns of human behavior. Okay? Mythology, in other words, is psychology misread as biography, history, and cosmology. The modern psychologist can translate it back to its proper denotations and thus rescue for the contemporary world a rich and eloquent document of the profoundest depths of human character. Okay. So they're saying it's all a psychological, it's all like a reference psychologically, like it's like a projection of the psyche, right? That's what he's kind of getting at with this. And he's saying people take it a little, he's not even saying that people take it too literally. He's saying like people take it the wrong way, I guess. But let's see. The modern psychologist can translate it back to its proper denotations and thus rescue for the contemporary world a rich and eloquent document of the profoundest depths of human character. Exhibited here as in a fluoroscope, okay, stand revealed the hidden process of the enigma Homo sapiens, Occidental and Oriental, primitive and civilized, contemporary and archaic. The entire spectacle is before us. We have only to read it, study its constant patterns, analyze its variations, and therewith come to an understanding of the deep forces that have shaped man's destiny and must continue to determine both our private and public lives. Okay? But if we are to grasp the full value of the materials, we must note that the myths are not exactly comparable to dream. Their figures originate from the same sources, the unconscious wells of fantasy, and their grammar is the same, but they are not spontaneous products of sleep. On the contrary, their patterns are consciously controlled, and their understood function is to serve as a powerful picture language for the communication of traditional wisdom. Okay, so he's saying that mythology is more of a structured framework and dreams are just more sporadic projections of your psyche. Okay. This is true already of the so-called primitive folk mythologies. The trans-susceptible shaman and the initiated antelope priest are not unsophisticated in the wisdom of the world, nor unskilled in the principles of communication by analogy. The metaphors by which they live and through which they operate have been brooded upon, searched, and discussed for centuries, even millenniums. They have served whole societies, furthermore, as the mainstays of thought and life. The culture patterns have been shaped to them. The youth have been educated and aged rendered-wise through the study, experience, and understanding of their effective initiatory forms. For they actually touch and bring into play the vital energies of the whole human psyche. They link the unconscious to the fields of practical action, not irrationality, in the manner of a neurotic projection. Okay. But in such fashion as to permit a mature and sobering practical comprehension of the fact world to play back as a stern control into the realms of infantile wish and fear. So, okay, and if this be true of the comparatively simple folk mythologies, the systems of myth and ritual by which the primitive hunting and fishing tribes support themselves, what may we see of such magnificent cosmic metaphors as those reflected in the great Homeric epics, the Divine Comedy of Dante, the Book of Genesis, and the timeless temples of the Orient? Until the most recent decades, these were the support of all human life and the inspiration of philosophy, poetry, and the arts. Where the inherited symbols have been touched by Lao Tse, Buddha, Zoroaster, Christ, or Muhammad, employed by a consummate master of the spirit as a vehicle of the profoundest moral and metaphysical instruction, obviously we are in the presence of immense consciousness than of darkness. Okay, so basically what's being said here is that, again, these stories, quote unquote, are the framework for society and the progression of society on a conscious level. And it's funny because my son Brandon, I talk about Brandon a lot, but he's watching all of the Star Wars. So it's kind of funny, like, this is the inspiration for Star Wars, and you can consider Star Wars to be like Divine Comedy level, Book of Genesis level. Like, it's that level, like, of I don't know how you would say it. I guess you could call it a mythology, but is it really? Like, it's just a story. But it's funny because he's saying that, all right, these pieces of work are what drive society forward, and something like Star Wars is that as well. That is kind of like, it sounds crazy to say that Star Wars is the foundation of a society, or like, like a vehicle for consciousness, but it's true. Okay, I'm not sure what else I'm not sure, like, I'm not on a literary level, I'm not really sure what else, but definitely Star Wars, like, that's probably the biggest example in a modern sense. Okay, makes sense. Let's read this part. Where the inherited symbols have been touched by a Lao Tse, Buddha, Zoroaster, Christ, or Muhammad, employed by a consummate master of the spirit as a vehicle of the profoundest moral and metaphysical instruction, obviously we are in the presence rather of immense consciousness than of darkness. So you can consider, this sounds crazy, chat, but like, just bear with me, bro. You can consider George Lucas like Buddha, bro. You can compare George Lucas to Buddha. Don't lose me. Okay, don't lose me. But you can compare George Lucas to Buddha in the sense where he's a consummate master of the spirit as a vehicle of the profoundest moral and metaphysical instruction. The story of Darth Vader, really all of the characters have their own hero's journey that they're going through. Like, even Yoda has to, like, even Yoda, the nigga is thousands of years old, and it's funny because he goes through pretty much All of them. I don't know if he's in the last three. I'm gonna rewatch the last three movies, but in the first 6, Yoda he goes through the entire thing multiple times. He's the oldest nigga in the whole franchise. Even up to when he dies and then he becomes a ghost and shit. Like, them niggas is still going. Ben Kenobi, all of them, they are cycling this hero's journey over and over. I think the most obvious parallels are gonna be Anakin and Luke, obviously, because it's more of like a generational thing, and yeah. So we can do one of those. I think we can do the Star Wars hero's journey comparison. There's probably tons of videos out there and tons of information on that, so I don't sound as crazy. Yeah, we'll reference those videos and stuff so we can get an idea. All right, so George Lucas, you can compare George Lucas to Buddha in this context only, okay? And so, to grasp the full value of the mythological figures that have come down to us, we must understand that they are not only symptoms of the unconscious, as indeed are all human thoughts and acts, but also controlled and intended statements of certain spiritual principles, which have remained as constant throughout the course of human history as the form and nervous structure of the human physique itself. Briefly formulated, the universal doctrine teaches that all the visible structures of the world, all things and beings, are the effects of a ubiquitous power out of which they rise. Okay, what is the Force? Okay, the Force is something that's supposed to be intrinsic to everyone. Everything, everyone that lives. I'm gonna just keep doing the George Lucas parallel because it makes it the most obvious, but because I want to relate it to where it's like, it's not as like Jesus Christy. Like, it is true and it's important on that level, but you also, on a modern sense, you kind of have to understand like the people that are also pushing these types of influential things that are alive today, because, you know, we don't want to take people for granted and we want to understand the time that we're living in on a modern sense. Like, this book is old as shit. Okay? So we want to be able to relate it to 2026. But yeah, to say that the Force is, you know, in everything, and then there's only certain people that know how to wield the Force. It's kind of meta, to be honest, because if you think about it, it's George Lucas that's wielding the Force by creating something like Star Wars. Okay, so it's just really meta. Facts. If you feeling me, facts. Okay. Briefly formulated, the universal doctrine teaches that all visible structures of the world, all things and beings, are the effects of a ubiquitous power out of which they rise, the Force, which supports and fills them during the period of their manifestation and back into which they must ultimately dissolve. This is the power known to science as energy. Bang! Now, you know what's funny? We need the post Star Wars version of this book, okay? Like, we need the like rewritten with Star Wars in the context, and it would make this book fucking crazy. But yeah, this is the power known to science as energy, to the Melanesians as mana, to the Sioux Indians as Wakanda, the Hindus as Shakti, and the Christians as the power of God. Wakanda? Hold on. See, bro, they be knowing what they doing. They talking about Wakanda as a place. Like, nah, they be know what they doing, bro. I swear to God, they do. It is what it is. The Hindus as Shakti and the Christians as the power of God. Its manifestation in the psyche is termed by the psychoanalyst libido, and its manifestation in the cosmos is the structure and flux of the universe itself. The apprehension of the source of this undifferentiated yet everywhere particularized substratum of being is rendered frustrate by the very organs through which the apprehension must be accomplished. The forms of sensibility and the categories of human thought, which are themselves manifestations of this power, so confine the mind that it is more normally impossible not only to see, but even to conceive beyond the colorful, fluid, infinitely various and bewildering phenomenal spectacle. Okay? This is crazy, okay? Let's run that back one more time. The forms of sensibility and the categories of human thought, which are themselves manifestations of this power, okay? So they're basically saying, like, because we think we're using the Force. The Force, you could say the Force, you could say mana, Wakanda, Shakti, or whatever. Yeah, in order to think this is what you're using, right? So confine the mind that is normally impossible not only to see but even to conceive beyond the colorful, fluid, infinitely various and bewildering phenomenal spectacle. So it's just a level of insight. He's describing a level of insight that people can attain, okay? We gotta hit this one. The theory of libido, Carl Jung. We gotta hit this one, chat. I'm not gonna lie. He got the reference in there. The function of ritual and myth is to make possible and then to facilitate the jump, by analogy. Forms and conceptions that the mind and its senses can comprehend are presented and arranged in such a way as to suggest a truth or openness beyond. Insight. And then the conditions for meditation having been provided, the individual is left alone. Myth is but the penultimate, the ultimate is openness, that void or being beyond the categories, into which the mind must plunge alone and be dissolved. Therefore, God and the gods are only convenient means themselves of the nature of the world of names and forms, though eloquent of and ultimately conducive to the ineffable. They are mere symbols to move and awaken the mind and to call it past themselves. Interesting take. He's saying that God and the myth analogies or the mythical references are basically just mental stimulants. He's saying they're mental stimulants to like jog your mind, to get you to be open to the insight necessary. Right? Heaven, hell, the mythological age, Olympus, and all other habitations of the gods are interpreted by psychoanalysis as symbols of the unconscious. The key to the modern systems of psychological interpretation, therefore, is this. The metaphysical realm equals the unconscious. Okay. This is actually a fact. All of the drugs that I've done, all of the psychedelic drugs that I've done, like, this is the problem, right? When I think about metaphysics on a conscious level, there is no, like, there's a way. The only way that I know for sure to be conscious and, you know, be able to tap into metaphysics is through some like real pure shit, like some real like Buddha type shit. But anything other than that, it's inducive. Like, it's completely inducive. You're not going metaphysical if you are conscious. It's just not gonna happen. Like, and I'm not like just full waking conscious. Like me right now on a screen, like it's not possible, bro. It is possible theoretically, but it's just not. We don't have anything that's inducive enough, like, to balance that. Like, we just don't. So the only ways that we know how right now are through like just vigorous spiritual work, vigorous mental work, vigorous emotional work. You gotta really get right. Like, you gotta OD get right. Like, you know what I'm saying? But there's no shortcut. Like, we don't have the shortcut yet. We don't have the shortcut. All right. The key to the modern systems of psychological interpretation, therefore, is this. The metaphysical realm equals the unconscious. Correspondingly, the key to open the door the other way is the same equation in reverse. The unconscious equals the metaphysical realm. For as Jesus states it, behold, the kingdom of God is within you. Indeed, the lapse of superconsciousness into the state of unconsciousness is precisely the meaning of the biblical image of the fall, the constriction of consciousness, to which we owe the fact that we see not the source of the universal power, but only the phenomenal forms reflected from that power, turn superconsciousness into unconsciousness, and at the same instant and by the same token creates the world. Okay, it's everything is reflectory, is what they're saying. Like, you know, your conscious creates the reality, and the reality reflects back into your consciousness. So interesting. Redemption consists in the return to the superconsciousness and therewith the dissolution of the world. This is the great theme and formula of the cosmogonic cycle, the mythical image of the world's coming to manifestation and subsequent return into the non-manifest condition. Equally, the birth, life, and death of the individual may be regarded as a descent into unconsciousness and return. The hero is the one who, while still alive, knows and represents the claims of the superconsciousness, which throughout creation is more or less unconscious. No, this is good. This is good. This is exactly what I'm here for. The adventure of the hero represents the moment in his life when he achieved illumination. The nuclear moment when, while still alive, he found and opened the road to the light beyond the dark walls of our living death. Yeah. And so it is that the cosmic symbols are presented in a spirit of thought bewildering sublime paradox. The kingdom of God is within, yet without. Also, God, however, is but a convenient means to wake the sleeping princess, the soul. Life is her sleep, death the awakening. The hero, the waker of his own soul, is himself but the convenient means of his own dissolution. God, the waker of the soul, is therewith his own immediate death. Wow, okay. Perhaps the most eloquent possible symbol of this mastery is that of the God crucified. The God offered himself to himself. Hold on. No, they're cooking crazy right now. The read in one direction, the meaning of the passage of the phenomenal hero into super consciousness. Okay, they say Jesus is a Pisces. They do say Jesus is a Pisces. You know, the symbol for Pisces, I think the nature, the Pisces nature, one is sacrificial, but I think also it's paradoxical. Okay, I think the nature of Pisces is paradoxical. You got the Vesica Pisces kind of like going into itself. So, yeah, I think that represents that paradox as well. But this is interesting. Perhaps God offered himself to himself. Like, you know, like Jesus Christ is God. He died for everybody, but he gave himself to God. So it's like a reflection thing. It's like it's a cyclical process. And I think that's the representation for us to die. Okay, like obviously not literally, but you know, that's the representation, like for us to die to ourselves. That's something that I used to say a lot. Like, yeah, you got to die to yourself. You got to die to yourself and really make those hard decisions like that will ultimately benefit you. That will ultimately benefit you. And it's not even like on some delayed gratification shit. It's literally like on some like probably the best word that I could use is like reincarnation, but yeah, it's kind of like that. It's like rebirth kind of thing. We've talked about it quite a lot through this book so far, so perhaps the most eloquent read in one direction, the meaning is the passage of the phenomenal hero into super consciousness. The body with its five senses, like that of Prince Five Weapons stuck to sticky hair, is left hanging to the cross of the knowledge of life and death, pinned in five places. The two hands, the 2 feet, and the head crowned with thorns. But also, God has descended voluntarily and taken upon himself this phenomenal agony. God assumes the life of man, and man releases the God within himself at the midpoint of the cross arms of the same coincidence of opposites. The same sun door through which God descends and man ascends, each as the other's food. Yo, the parallels are just so crazy. If the insight is hitting you as well, please type in the chat. Like, if you're feeling insightful, please let me know, because I'm feeling hella insightful. The modern student may, of course, study these symbols as he will, either as a symptom of others' ignorance or as a sign to him of his own, either in terms of a reduction of metaphysics to psychology or vice versa. The traditional way was to meditate on the symbols in both senses. In any case, they are telling metaphors of the destiny of man, man's hope, man's faith, and man's dark mystery. Good reads. We didn't get any stories this chapter, so that's amazing. But this this is very interesting. This is very interesting, and I think he summed it up very well in this last sentence, where he was like, the modern student may study these symbols as he will, either as a symptom of others' ignorance, to say like, all right, are these niggas fucking stupid? And you know, he's getting smarter to be like, I don't want to be dumb like these people. Or as a sign to him of his own ignorance, to be like, wait, am I stupid? Like, am I, like, what don't I know? Or as a sign to him his own, either in terms of a reduction of metaphysics to psychology, or a reduction of psychology to metaphysics. Now, when I was younger, and I was like, yo, I'm about to study this shit. The first thing, because this is before I was even a spiritual person. Like, well, I'm lying. I was a spiritual person as a child, and then I became atheist, then I became spiritual again. But during my atheist era, I was just straight psychology, and it's crazy because my favorite psychologists are all mystics. Like, all of my favorite psychologists are all mystics. So it's like, at the time I didn't really know. I was just taking it for psychology. But it's funny because the psychology led me into the metaphysical study, and I didn't really even care until after I had my own spiritual experiences and stuff. So it was like I already had that framework of psychology, and I didn't try to reduce the psychology to metaphysics. I always tried to marry it together because I knew that there's a fundamental disconnect between the two. Like, you know, there are parallels and there are ways for it to connect quite seamlessly, but there's also a fundamental disconnect even between the sciences of it. So this is interesting that he's saying that, you know, actually fire. Okay, so we got a big one tomorrow. We got a good 10 pages tomorrow. We got a good 10 pages. Ooh. Exciting. They say emanations like coming out from you. We go preview? Let's go preview. The consciousness of the individual rests on a sea of night into which it descends in slumber and out of which it mysteriously wakes. So in the imagery of myth, the universe is precipitated out of and reposes upon a timelessness back into which it again dissolves. Such a cyclical book. This book is so cyclical. All right, good shit. Say bye, YouTube. Good shit, y'all. Good shit.